If you have recently been promoted or you are interested in being promoted, you probably already know that 90% of the time, those roles involve people management, which can often be the hardest part of any job. And while I have absolute confidence that you are going to knock it out of the park, I did want to warn you about a behavior pattern that I have deemed the Michael Scott School of Leadership. So we all remember the lovable character Michael Scott from The Office, the boss who was phenomenal at sales, only to get promoted and be completely terrible at people management. So how do you claim a different fate? Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm an executive career coach helping mid to senior level corporate women rise through the ranks, get promoted, and transition into work they love, including leadership roles. Let's dive in. So the number one mistake that I see new leaders so often make is the unwillingness or the inability to delegate. And I know in corporate America, we are taught to hit the ground running and hit the ground running hard, but sometimes it's too hard and we don't have the ability to see the forest through the trees. So if you are currently screaming at me through your computer saying, I don't have time to teach somebody how to do blah, 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 or it's just easier for me to do it myself, then I need you to immediately have what I call a sounding board meeting. So a sounding board meeting, if you haven't had one before, is when you meet with either your manager or a coach or a mentor, and they help you understand the situation from a different perspective. And what help you're going to ask them for is to understand what is high-level strategy, aka what you as the new leader need to do, versus what is administrative or tactical, aka what you need to delegate. So that is step one. Step two, once you have completed that, is you need to meet with the individuals on your team, every direct that you manage, and I want you to ask them the following question. What are you great at? What lights you up? What would you say you do better than anybody else? And after they answer that question, I want you to ask them about their colleagues. What would you say about Nick? What would you say that Nick is great at? Or Stephanie, what is Stephanie great at? And then once you have those answers and a better understanding of everybody on your team, it's going to make it a lot easier to understand what you can delegate where. And that leads me to mistake number two, which is, and I see this so often that I feel like I'm almost being redundant in saying it, but it's micromanaging. So let's back up a step, and we're not going to talk about what micromanaging is, but let's talk about what it stems from. And it stems from fear and a lack of trust. So I had a CEO who had a saying, and it was trust is earned in drips and lost in buckets. There is a way to accelerate the way in which we earn trust, and it starts with you as the leader being a little bit vulnerable and a little bit transparent. Now, when I say vulnerable and transparent, I am not, suggesting you walk into a room naked and share your entire life story, including the intimate details. But it's sharing something such as, a time when you failed and what you learned from it. Or maybe an experience you wish you could do over and why it meant so much to you and why you'd like to repeat it or what you would do differently in that case. So something a little bit vulnerable in that regard. Let them know your expectations, let them know your pet peeves, let them know how you like to manage or what you would consider your leadership style, and then leave the door open when individuals need to ask for help. And they will. They'll come to you if they have an assignment that's too hard or they just don't understand what it is that you're looking for. But you have to really set the tone from the beginning. And once you do that, then the second piece comes into play. So one of the truths that I realized when I was a new manager is that I do not, and you do not, have a monopoly on truth. What do I mean by that? So if you'll indulge me for a second, I want to illustrate with my 5-year-old's favorite book. And it's a book that you might know. It's called Every Night is Pizza Night. But in this book, the heroine believes very, very, very wholeheartedly that pizza is the very best food. And her mother asks her, well, how do you know that pizza is the best if you've never tried any other foods? So our heroine goes on a quest to try new foods. And what she discovers in the end is that, yes, pizza is a best food, but there are a lot of best foods. So how does that relate to you? You may have a process or a way in which you manage client relationships or the way emails are sent out or triggered in a marketing campaign or strategy for the learning and development team, whatever it is that you do and did before. But it doesn't mean that your methodology for doing things is the only way in which to do things. You need to trust your team, and you will need to allow them to run free to figure out what works for them. So how this works is you provide the assignment, you hold the space for them, you let them know you're there if they need help or they get caught up in something, and then at the end you evaluate the work. And this means you need to be able to coach and be able to direct them as to how to improve the quality of the work if it's not up to your standards. But you need to articulate these things very clearly, and you need to be able to let them go. So to recap, earn the trust your team in turn, and allow them the freedom and flexibility to make their own mistakes and to figure out their best process for how to reach the end goal. And that leads to our third and final mistake, which we see new managers make, and that is bringing their trauma to work. So what do we mean by this? Let me level set for a moment. We have a range of human emotions, but if we boil it down to the end, there are two: love and fear. Stick with me for a second. So when we talk about love, let's talk about the derivatives. What are some of the derivatives of love that show up at work? Happiness, kindness, connection, collaboration, helpfulness. You get the picture. It's an optimal team working together. But when we look at fear and what people might be afraid of, what are the actions that takes? Anger, bullying, defensiveness, curtness, exclusivity. The list goes on, and it could be a lot worse than what I've just mentioned. People act out of their trauma because they haven't healed it, and they have a fear behind it of not being good enough, not being smart, not being included, not being competent. And it's really important to understand the core as you go into a people management and a leadership position. Combine that with the fact that multiple studies have shown that leaders are not well equipped with conflict resolution skills, and you really have the perfect storm. So what can we do? So first and foremost, let's start with us. We have to be able to recognize our own triggers and when they're about to start. And what I mean by that is we call our emotions feelings because we physically feel them in the body. And I can tell you, when I get triggered, my face starts to turn red, I start to get hot, and my throat starts to close up, almost like somebody is wringing out a washcloth. And I'm sure that's different for you, but figuring out, what happens in my body physically before I start to freak out can really go a long way as far as recognizing your own trigger. The second piece, when you recognize it, is to put a stopgap in there. And the best thing that you can do is create a little bit of time and a little bit of space. So if it's you alone who is triggered, the best trick, and I learned this from Dr. Pat Allen, is just to simply say, "Excuse me, I need to use the bathroom. I need to use the ladies' room right now." And then you can create that time and space. If it's a group of individuals that you are leading, which can very often be the case, a catchphrase such as, "Let's come back to this in an hour or two," or "Let's come back to this tomorrow," whatever it needs to be. And having that handy, because your prefrontal cortex is going to be offline and your amygdala is probably going to be firing very, very rapidly. So making sure you have these at hand and making sure that you practice this ahead of time can go a very, very long way. And once you have calmed yourself down, whether through breath or whether through time or any other tool in your toolbox, come back to this situation, and especially if it is a group, use some very open-ended questions. Tell me what I'm not seeing. Tell me what I am not understanding about your hesitancy to this proposal. What's your vision for the outcome of this project? And making sure that there is ample space to talk. And again, when relaying vulnerability, remember that you as the leader need to go first. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you have any questions about what we covered today, I'd love to hear from you. You can put that in the comments below. As always, if there's someone who you think can benefit from this, please share and like and subscribe below. I come out with new videos each week, and so I'll see you then. Take care.